in my own estimation, I think there's so much power, there's so much potential in our churches as they exist today if they were gonna really restructure in a way their priorities and redirect their resources. There's so much possibility for them to transform the world. On this last episode of our 7th season, Pastor, we are wrapping up a season that has really been challenging to work through because it's really speaking to themes that are forcing us to think about how we live our lives and how we practically experience and practice our faith in the world.
So true, so true. And it begs the question, why does God have a church in the world? Why does he choose to have a community of saints, of servants, as I call them, in the world? This whole season about the least of these gives us the answer. And I'm hoping even as we wrap up the season, Joel, our listeners will begin to examine themselves and ask themselves, am I being faithful to my calling as a part of this community of servants?
Yeah, because I think even as you have been saying and insisting that every one of us should start with where they are, with what they have, to do the much they can. God's agency of transforming the world is the church. It's a community of people who have come together with a vision of transforming the world as the mandate has been given to them by God.
The church should be a community of transformed people, transforming people. Transformed people, transforming people. As they come into contact with us, as we deliberately and intentionally interact with the world. We're going to come to that in a moment. But let's see what Hebrews 10:23-25 is telling us. Because that may give us a good platform from which to launch.
Hebrews 10:23 reads,
to 25.
Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as in the manner of some, but exhorting one another, so much the more as you see the day approaching.
Anything you got from that, Joel? Anything jumped out at you as you were reading that? A few things jumped out at me.
For me, it's this charge to commit ourselves even more so to each other, to encourage each other along the path of doing the good work.
Yes, that hit me in the eyes immediately. That our community of faith is to stir each other up onto good work. So first of all, we hold on to our confession of faith, because the basis by which you and I are brothers is through that faith in Jesus Christ, that common faith in Jesus Christ. We didn't know each other. We met in church.
Mm-hmm.
It was through the word of God that you and I became friends and began to even do this podcast. So Paul is saying, you know what? Hold on to that faith. Hold on. But even as you hold on, you, Joel, and I in Skip hold on, and Jerry over there and Bob over there hold on, and Cynthia and Carol, he says we need to also stir each other up onto good works. So our fellowshipping should have the purpose of encouraging each other, of reminding, reprimanding even sometimes. Where is your good work? Are you continuing to walk in the faith of Jesus Christ to fulfill the mandate given to us? And then he says, and don't forsake the assembling. Why do you think he says we should not forsake the assembling of ourselves?
Because it provides a chance for us to meet and keep reevaluating where we are.
I love that, yes. To keep the vision alive. Have you ever had one of those blah kind of weeks, but you went to church and somehow the message preached, the fellowship enjoyed, meeting someone who shared his or her testimony just kind of built your spirit up and say, I need to get back on a good foot, get back on the way.
Yeah, and Pastor, for me actually, I've even been battling the whole idea of going to church, because I think the community should be formed in such a way that in any one given day or in any one given opportunity, I am able to meet with people who will spur me along. regardless of me having to wait until a given Saturday.
And it should not simply be to spur me along in being religious. He didn't say that.
Mm-hmm.
Each one of us has to hold on to the faith. That's your doctrine, your belief, your basis for being part of the body of Christ. But no, we have to spur each other on to good works. And these good works are not talking about religious works within your church organization, but religious works within the broader community, within the world. Jesus said, go into all the church. No, he said, go into all the world.
Yeah. I mean, one way of defining the church again is where we come in so that we can go out.
I love that too, where we come in so that we can go out, yes. So let us establish once and for all in this podcast, the church exists to serve the world, not to serve itself.
Tell us more, because that is a difficult idea to appreciate with the way we see church today.
A very difficult idea because we have usurped the purpose of church.
And church seems to be serving itself.
Maybe I should have said what I said differently. The church, the organizational aspect of church, the institutional aspect of church has usurped the dynamic, organismic aspect of a living organism that is reaching out and serving the community. I serve as pastor of a church, Joel, where it was always trouble to get the church board to vote money towards evangelism or buying spiritual literature to distribute or doing anything community-wise. But pastor, we have a limited budget. We don't have so much money. But this same church would vote a whole lot of money for the yearly church banquet. If I asked for $400, $500 to buy books and literature, or maybe to bring in a preacher, to do something that wasn't internally beneficial, they would kick and scream. But for the yearly banquet, they would, without a blink of an eye, vote $1,000 for that banquet or something like that. This would be a very crass example of a church that's living to serve itself. And many times we see this happening. The church seems to live to serve itself.
Yeah, and Pastor Evan, the area you bring up of the budget is one that lately has got me thinking about what it reflects. Because truly, if you want to see what a church is interested in, what a church's priority are, look at the budget.
I like that, and I agree with you 100%. I was going to say that when I saw you saying it, I say, he gets it, he gets it. Your budget says where your heart really is. You got to put your money where your mouth is. Or maybe put your mouth where your money is. And so, if I see your budget is all about the programs and the things that keep us, new benches, better music for us, and all these things, but nothing towards the community services department, very little towards, let's say, evangelism and stuff like that, then one has to ask yourself the question, what are we here for? Jesus helps us answer that question in Matthew 5:13-16.
It reads, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men."
Two great metaphors, salt and light. The church exists to impact the world, to be a preservative, a flavoring to the world. It gives taste to the world. It preserves the world. And as somebody once said, salt is only effective if it is put in contact with the thing it's supposed to season. Salt in the shaker, salt in the bottle is no use. And so if the church is salt, it immediately implies that as church members, as members of the body of Christ, we should be deliberately and intentionally seeking to reach out and be in contact with the world, with our community.
That's really when we have value as salt, when we are out there actively engaged. And Pastor, even think about the theme of this season, the least of these, how we engage the least of these, and how we look out for them and really reach them. That action represents our appreciation and understanding that we are called to that mission and to be the salt in that perspective and in that aspect.
I would agree 100% with that. In fact, I was thinking the least of these begins in the church itself. That poor brother, that poor sister, that illiterate sister, that person who is immigrant that came here seeking a better life. How do I treat that person? What is my attitude towards those within the community, like the church in Acts, where they took care of their community? Once I begin to become sensitized to those in my very presence who are suffering among my members, hey, I haven't seen Sister Sherry for 3 weeks. I wonder what happened. Then I might find out her husband died. I might find out that her child was in trouble. I might find out so many things. Once I become sensitized and I begin to act with compassion towards those within my community, it begins to open my eyes to those in the community, outside, to begin now touching the lives of those I see on the street, in the nursing home, in the hospice, in different places. And God will bring them to our doorstep. Trust me, God will bring them to us. That's on the individual level. But then as a church now, we should be deliberately planning programs and having a well-funded community services department, a well-funded poor fund, a well-funded department that reaches out to do good in the community.
Do you think that is possible if a church has not set its vision that way, or at least the church has not realized this commitment to the list of these that we've been talking about?
It will not do that. Again, as you said, show me your budget, and I'll tell you where your heart really is. And if we have not seen ourselves as a community of servants, number one, if we have not understood that the church exists to serve the world and not to serve itself, if we don't understand ourselves as salt to preserve and to bring flavor, and that salt is only good when it is outside of the shaker and outside of the receptacle, then obviously we will fail dramatically in doing this.
Because I think, Pastor, that's the challenge that exists in a lot of our churches. In my own estimation, I think there's so much power, there's so much potential in our churches as they exist today if they were gonna really restructure in a way their priorities and redirect their resources. There's so much possibility for them to transform the world. Because
I would say so.
There's so much resource, there's so much willingness, power, in terms of the manpower that exists there. But I guess what we are not seeing, Pastor, is this direction and action towards those who are in need, the least of these.
Am I hearing you to say that there is enough within us to make a greater impact on the world?
Yes, I am. That's exactly
you're
what I'm saying.
You're suggesting that the church, even as it exists today, the church that is always asking for money,
right?
The church that is always saying we don't have enough, you are saying that we have enough.
Yes, I mean, at that level, we all even have to live at that level with the master leaving us with something to use. The church has something that it does not exhaustively used yet, as the master had apportioned it.
So in any given church congregation, you're saying there are enough working people whose resources, if they were faithful in giving towards these activities of helping the least of these, there would be enough.
Yes.
And within our organizational structure, if we were to look at our bank account, we would probably see enough to do much more.
Yes.
Okay. I'm glad that you said it and not me.
It has to be the case, Pastor, because, for me, even when you look even at government, the issue has never been that the resources are few. It's that the bureaucracy, the priorities are
skewed,
are upside down. And so resources get lost in places and at points and for reasons that are secondary to the primary purpose of those spaces.
So what should a member do? No, let's not go there.
No, we should, Pastor, because really, if our listeners are going to have to contend with these realities in their local churches, we have to help them at least think through what they can do, how they can participate in actually transforming those spaces. Because otherwise, we'll also be just running away from supporting and empowering them to pursue something that can be transformative.
So are you suggesting that every member should come to that place where he has to make a choice between feeding the bureaucracy and feeding the poor?
I think every member should at least be able to contend or to even ask the difficult questions about what is our church focusing on and why? What is the priorities and why? Why these and not that? Because this is not some hidden idea or concept, Pastor. This is open. Scriptures openly speaks to where our priorities should be. And I think that every member should not only the one way you can take responsibility as a church member in trying to serve your community and in trying to be the salt is by asking the big questions even within that community and saying, are we rightly focused? Are we rightly positioned to serve the community?
Which would hint at why Jesus used two metaphors. You are the salt and you are the light. It seems to represent two ways of interacting with the world that the church should be impacting the world in two distinct but related ways. Just as Jesus Christ himself, he came and said, the Spirit has anointed me to give sight to the blind, to set at liberty those that are in prison, but also to preach the good news, right?
Mm-hmm.
We see Jesus went about doing good. It says he healed the sick and then he taught them. So it appears that Jesus was both salt by physically interacting with people, by changing the environment and giving them flavor in their physical lives, but he was also light in providing a truth that will open their darkened minds to greater spiritual reality. So maybe as a church, we need to fund well enough that aspect of our church life, and those of us who are individual Christians, where I'm physically impacting people, I am interacting with them socially, economically, in their space in the world, yet I should be providing a teaching and a light of hope for a better day, as we said in our last episode. So when he says you are light now, he's saying the church is acting in this way to make people's lives on the earth better.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm hungry and I'm in pain, it's difficult to hear your sermon. But now that my hunger is fed, now that my sickness is alleviated, now that I'm a little more comfortable, even as Jesus Christ himself did, I can hear your word of the gospel. I still maintain, Joel, that preaching is enhanced by charity and generosity. That the word of the gospel is given freshness and vitality when it comes on the back end of me interacting in a kind, generous, helpful manner.
Yes. No, I totally agree. And it's even in both ways, because even when you look at Sister White's statement on Christ's method, you have to care for the needs of the people first before you even seek to step in and share the truth you may have.
Yes. So these are the two prongs of the church's attack against the kingdom of darkness. I'm going to alleviate suffering. I'm going to make people's life more pleasant. I'm going to ease the pain, especially of the least of these. And as I do this, I'm also going to shed the light of the gospel, tell them there's hope and there is a better day coming. So as a community of servants, we do assemble together to encourage each other onto good works, but also because in unity there is strength. If 100 of us have to do something, it will be much more impactful than if one has to do it.
And that's the point I was making about God really using the church as that most impactful force in the world. Because it's this collective of people that now has compounded effect in terms of its ability to impact the world.
So when I pull myself apart, I have weakened my impact on the world.
Correct.
But when we join together, we can move as an army. So we're encouraging each other.
So that we can be more impactful.
Yes. And nobody falls by the wayside because we're encouraging each other.
Mm-hmm.
And as we come together, we keep the vision alive.
Mm-hmm.
We keep the vision sharp.
Right.
We are encouraged. We are taught. We are instructed. And now we are lifting each other up as we go into the world to be salt and light.
Right.
So what would you say, Joel, you took away from this season? What would you say perhaps was the most impactful thing for your life that you took away?
Yeah, I think this season, among the many things that it has really brought to the fore for me and maybe even been very instructive is the fact that I have to really realize where God's core concern is. I mean, looking back to maybe even an episode or two ago where we spoke about Micah distilling what we should be concerned with to loving mercy, acting justly. Isaiah also speaking about that being the core concern of God. And so it has reshaped my understanding and appreciation of what God's primary concern is for his people and where God is looking at, even as we think about the other aspects of our faith that he's trying to transform. Because I think for most of us, when we think about what God requires of us and what he's calling of us, we think of it morally. How good are we? What are we, how are we acting? How are we being nice? But we are not looking outside of ourselves and thinking that God's core concern is how are we acting towards others? How are we lifting up the world as it is?
For me, it was, again, like you said, that consciousness that righteousness goes beyond religious uprightness and avoiding these personal moral failures. But it's a dynamic, energizing force that causes me to see and to move towards those who are in pain, to be generous, to be more giving. For me, it challenged my own natural selfishness. Like I said, I don't naturally have the gift of giving. But I've found that as we have gone through this season more and more, I've become more joyful in my giving, more intentional even. There are times I would give, but no, I see where it's blessing me, where it's challenging me to take me on a higher plane. It has also made me open my eyes more, Joel, towards the least of these. Just 2 days ago, yesterday I think it was, I was driving and I realized there was a car stopped in front of me. I thought he was just stopped at the light, but then I saw his flashes on. I realized this car was stalled. I needed to get home. And I realized I'm not a mechanic. I probably couldn't do anything to help this person. And I didn't stop because it was a lot of cars coming back and forth and I really had nothing to offer. But the reason I mention it is that I didn't just pass by without even being disturbed in my mind. There was a time I would say, shuck, this guy shut down. I hope somebody helps. And I would have just gone my way. But yesterday, I paused. I kind of, it was something in me wanted to do something. I knew I was not a mechanic. I probably can help. But something said, you can't just leave this guy beside the road. What will become of him? Just the fact that my mind was disturbed, my peace was disturbed, and I wanted to do something is growth.
So there's been a consciousness that has been awakened.
Yes. A consciousness to see what I would not have seen before and to feel what I would not have felt before. Mm-hmm. So my prayer is to go beyond seeing and feeling, but to start
acting,
doing. Mm-hmm. So as we continue to meditate on this and I continue to imbibe, as it were, the sweet rays of light that was shared during this season, I say, Lord, help me to see more, to feel more, and to do more for the least of these. Because these are the ones who need hope. These are the ones you identify with. These are the ones that will become my judgment if I don't act kindly and Christ-likely towards them. And I'm hoping, listeners, as you have listened and gone along on this journey, something has stirred in you. Your eyes have been opened. Your heart has been softened. And your hands made more agile and nimble to helping the least of these. If that has happened to you, as it is happening to me and as it has happened with Joel, this season would have been worth it. And we would be truly in a place to be God's community of servants, to bring light and hope into the world.
Thank you for journeying with us through this season and even for listening to this episode. Let Us Go Deeper is an independent ministry, and your contribution are essential to sustaining this journey. Please make any contributions you may to patreon.com/ patreon.com/LUGD. That is patreon.com/LUGD.
And if this is your first time, please subscribe. And if you're one of our regular listeners, share the link, invite your friends to listen in, and they too can be blessed by this podcast. Let us go deeper.